Welcome to R&R Living Life. We begin this episode leaving Kalaru and making our way back through Bega and onto the Princess Highway that would take us to Eden and further south. As it was a moving day and we did not have far to go, we enjoyed the peace and quiet of the morning in the campground. We made our way back across the flood-out country of the Jarrett Creek, where the countryside was so lush and green, to Bega, where we refuelled. From there we continued along the Princess Highway to Woolumla, a small village on the side of the highway, where we went in and had a look around. You could quite easily drive past this little town, but we were thankful we hadn't, as it was quite an interesting little place. Again, lots of interesting history. We continued along the Princess Highway, crossing the Yawaka River between Penambula and Eden. The river, just over 22 kilometres in length, is a perennial river and is part of the Penambula River catchment. The river rises on the eastern slopes of the Bold Granite Range, southeast of Wyndham, and flows generally south, east and then northeast, before reaching its confluence with the Penambula River within the Penambula Lake. The lake, which is about halfway between Penambula and Eden, is also known as Broadwater, and is recognised as one of the healthiest estuaries in the state, with access to both the lake and the ocean. Boaters and paddlers can travel up the river mouth and cross the bar to Merimbula Bay and beyond, depending on conditions. The maximum depth of the lake is approximately 12.5 metres, with an average depth of about 2 metres. Oysters have been farmed in Penambula Lake since the 1890s, and the estuary is home to 16 oyster farms, with a total 60 hectares of the lease area. I am always interested in seeing the Queenslander-style homes raised above ground, with their wide verandas, often enclosed now. They were certainly built to suit the climate, allowing air to circulate under and around the house, keeping it cool in summer, and with a chimney to keep it warm in winter. We passed through the Nullika State Forest, with yellow stringy bark and gully peppermint trees along the ridges and upper slopes, and mountain grey ash on the sheltered southern and lower slopes and gullies, as well as some scattered red ironbark trees. In the viney scrub areas, warm temperate rainforest could be seen. It was an interesting section of the highway. On reaching the outskirts of Eden, we stopped at Eden Scout Hut and went for a walk along the boardwalk that meanders around Kirilo Lake foreshore, through Melaleuca Forest, across the salt marshes and onto the estuary mouth, but we did not go that far. As we made our way out onto the boardwalk, we were met by a flock of black swans and other water birds enjoying the shallow waters along the lake's edge. The lake had an abundance of bird life. Not only the black swans as we commenced our walk, but a few pelicans, a pair of hooded plovers, and some cormorants. We could hear bellbirds as we walked along the boardwalk in amongst the paper barks. Once we had stretched our legs and enjoyed the lake, we returned to the boat and gidget. I got carried away trying to photograph the bird life on and around the lake. To see so much bird life was amazing. The colours on some of the ducks were so vibrant, especially the males, and the swans were having quite a chat to each other. The pair of plovers were very protective of their little area beside the boardwalk. As we were on our return walk, we spied a flock of little water birds all grouped together, making their way further out into the lake. They were too far away, and I have no idea what they were, but made for interesting watching as they bobbed about on the water. From the Scout Hut we continued on through Eden to Boydtown Holiday Park, located on the pristine shores of the spectacular Twofold Bay, arriving just after midday. After lunch, as it was certainly beautiful weather, we went for a walk out along the stunning white 1 kilometre long beach with unspoiled ocean views across the bay to Eden, and then up to the ruins of the church on the hill. There was so much history to the area of Boydtown, situated on Twofold Bay, the third deepest natural harbour in the southern hemisphere. The bay covers an area of over 30 square kilometres, with two distinct bights, Kalikali Bay and Nullika Bay. It is also known for its intriguing whale history and the famous killers of Eden, the orcas. Beowa National Park, formerly Ben Lomond National Park, fringes the southern edge of the bay, with Balawan, Mount Inlay, a quiet watcher to the southwest. Again, I got carried away photographing the shells and other debris washed up on the sand. For someone who never went to the beach as a young girl, the shells, small rocks, coral in some places, and the bits of vegetation intrigue me, and I often wonder what it would be like to live under the sea, where you could actually see life there. But that will never happen, as I am not fond of the ocean. Too many unknowns. The original settlement in the bay was founded by Benjamin Boyd in 1843 to service his properties on the Monaro Plains. He envisaged his town becoming the largest port between Sydney and Melbourne, and to be the export centre for cattle and sheep from his substantial holdings on the Monaro and in the Riverina. Also, it would be the principal site for his whaling operations and the home port for his fleet of steamships that would connect Boydtown to markets throughout the world. In 1843, Boyd purchased land on Twofold Bay as the site of a town that was intended to ultimately include cottages for up to 400 workmen, and for East Boyd, the site of his whaling station. He imported sandstone from Sydney to construct a lighthouse on South Head, and also commissioned inns and churches, housing and storerooms, wharves and stockyards to be built. It really was a bold plan. The Seahorse Inn, named after one of Boyd's steamships, was commenced in March 1843 and completed the following year in October. A first set of stores was completed in June 1843. The construction of a wool store was in progress in September 1844, while the boiling down works at his whaling station was completed in February 1844. Other work completed in that year were a 400-foot wharf along with a second store, and work started on the church in September of that year, with the exterior completed in 1847. A row of houses, which Boyd christened Jerusalem, was built, and 45 miles of road leading into the Boydtown port were also constructed. But by 1848, as a result of a combination of circumstances, Boyd had become bankrupt. The development of Boydtown ceased. We found very little that was left of the original Boydtown, except for the Seahorse Inn and the church ruins. When Boyd's finances collapsed, the town was abandoned from the 1840s until the first renovation of the Seahorse Inn in the 1930s. The church building, which had begun in 1843 but was never completed as the Boydtown development went broke in 1849, and has remained abandoned ever since. Bushfires destroyed the roof in 1926. It has continued to deteriorate. The ruins are on a hill above the renovated Seahorse Inn. Just trying to keep up with some of the history that I had been learning and reading about was staggering. There is so much out there that until you go exploring, you never know about it. I spent the rest of the afternoon catching up on chores around Gidget and digesting all that I had read and seen for the day. The park had a huge camping area with very few campers, so it was very quiet and relaxing. The following day was an exploring day, so off we went towards Eden, the most southerly town in New South Wales, located between Nullika Bay to the south and Kalikali Bay in the north reaches of Twofold Bay. The town is built on undulating land adjacent to the third deepest natural harbour in the southern hemisphere, and Snug Cove on its western boundary. Whaling ships had been operating in the area in 1791. George Bass first took shelter in Twofold Bay on the return leg of his voyage to Van Diemen's Land, now Tasmania, in February 1798, having first sighted the bay on the southward leg of his journey in December 1797. Later, in September 1798, on a subsequent voyage with Matthew Flinders, they surveyed the bay for the first time. On arriving in Eden, we made our way to the Rotary Park Lookout and Lighthouse, one of Eden's most spectacular lookout points with panoramic views across Twofold Bay. After enjoying the views, we made our way back towards Snug Cove and enjoyed the sculptures in the park. Eden Sculptures is a concept to help create an outdoor sculpture cultural trail throughout the town, from the headland to Assling Bay and Lake Clurilo. The sculptures currently on display at Snug Cove are the beginning of a temporary exhibition to liven up the area until it is developed. As it unfolds, there will be more works to include a maritime theme and other local sculptures. Then it was back onto the Princess Highway to Edmund Road to check out the Navy Wharf, but on the way we crossed Wayland Swamp, then passed through the last New South Wales National Park, the Boyd National Park. Rick and I enjoyed the drive along the mostly sandy road and at one point followed a deer for a short distance. The trees along the road were in spectacular bloom. Our third stop for the morning was at the historic Davidson Whale Station. The station is located on the shores of Kaya Inlet on the southern shores of Twofold Bay at Edron, on the far south coast of New South Wales, about 35 kilometres by road south of Eden. The station was built in 1896. Shore-based whaling at Twofold Bay began in 1828 and was undertaken by numerous whaling groups, with the main ones being the Imlay brothers, Benjamin Boyd and the Davidson family. Old open boat techniques were in continuous use at Twofold Bay for over 100 years. The historic site was created in April 1986 and covers an area of 27 hectares. The Davidson Whaling Station was the longest operating shore-based whaling station in Australia and the last of its type to close down. The Davidson family began whaling around 1860. The try-works for boiling down the blubber was built inside Kia Inlet, possibly on the site of an earlier try-works where whales could be drawn up on a sandy beach. In 1896, George Davison built the cottage Lockgara above the try-works on 17 acres of leasehold land. This land now comprises the majority of the historic site. In 1920, when Davidson applied to convert his leasehold to free title, his holding consisted of a cleared, partly fenced area with a 6-room weatherboard house, detached kitchen, workshop, established orchards, gardens and a dam. Further outbuildings and additions to the cottage were added later. Dr. and Mrs. Boyd, who purchased the property for a private residence in 1954, replaced much of the garden area and made further additions to the cottage. Until the first decade of this century, whaling was carried out almost full-time from the station by Alexander Davidson, his son John and grandson George. A catch of 10 to 15 whales each season was reported. After that time, whaling became an opportunistic activity, with George Davidson undertaking farming and grazing on the site to buffer the whaling station against fluctuations in the market and uneven seasonal catches. In 1925, the entire catch for the season was reported at 2 whales. In 1929, the last whale was caught at Twofold Bay, and the Davidsons moved from the station in the 1940s. The detached kitchen dining room may have predated the cottage Lockgara. The remains of a garden shed and a shower built by the Boyds gave us an insight into life all those years ago. The remainder of the site consists of an open woodland of woolly butt and silvertop ash on the exposed ridges, with a moist forest of black wattle and small shrubby bushes in the gullies, and monkey gum with bracken undergrowth on the slopes above Kia Inlet. It was such an isolated spot on the coastline. From the whale station we made our way to Davidson Wharf. As there were no Navy ships anchored, we walked out along most of its length. The port is one of 2 regional ports in New South Wales. The other is at Yamba on the north coast. The port is the largest fishing port in New South Wales and also the export point for woodchip. It is shared with the Department of Defence, who have constructed a large wharf for the servicing of their warships. The port also handles cruise ships. We could see Edor House perched on the hill overlooking the wharf and bay. There were also huge timber piles and wood chip piles ready for loading. From the wharf we made our way out to the remains of Boyd Tower on the southern headland of Twofold Bay. The tower, 23 metres high, was constructed in 1847 of Plymouth sandstone imported from Sydney. The tower was intended to be a lighthouse, but the New South Wales government deemed it unsuitable for the purpose and was later used by the Davidson family to alert their whaling crews at Keir Inlet to the presence of migrating whales. Benjamin Boyd built the tower as a symbol of his power. Not long after the government deemed it unsuitable, Boyd went bankrupt and fled to California, abandoning his debts and workers. Sadly, it fell into disuse in the mid to late 1920s, with the internal stairs and flooring now rotted away. It was then struck by lightning. It was such an interesting piece of history. From the lookout we had a spectacular view of Twofold Bay and its red cliffs, with its spectacular sea-carved landscape and the striking display of folded red rock platforms that contrasted against the sapphire blue water of the ocean. As it was quite windy, the swell was stunning as it crashed against the coastline, sending huge sprays of water up against the rocks. Beowa National Park, formerly Ben Boyd National Park, spans 47 kilometres of rocky coastline and sheltered inlets with crystal clear waters. It really was an amazing place. Rick and I enjoyed driving along gravel roads, and this one was so smooth with very few corrugations that I have included quite a few photos of it. There were some spots where the water had laid and people had driven through making holes in the road, but on the whole it was a great drive. What an adventure we were having. I will leave you here as we travel further into Beowa National Park towards Disaster Bay and Green Cape. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Give us a thumbs up if you have and leave a comment. Join us next time as we reach Green Cape and return to Boydtown. Stay safe and enjoy life. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, living life.